This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Today on CityCast Houston, it's Earth Day in H-Town, a perfect time to get outside and enjoy your neighborhood park. But a lot of Houston parks are struggling or hard to get to. I'm bringing on our friend and Pulitzer Prize finalist, Evan Mintz, who's done a deep dive into this issue. And before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by treesforhouston.org. They're an amazing organization planting and maintaining trees across H-Town. I'll tell you more about them after our conversation. It's Tuesday, April 22nd. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Evan, Houston has a bad reputation for our freeways, strip malls. Basically, it's a concrete jungle, right? But we actually have some really great parks and green spaces. Why don't you think we get more credit for this?
Houston has some really good crown jewel parks. Think of Hermann Park and Memorial Park and Emancipation Park and Buffalo Bayou Park. You've got these like best in the country kind of parks. But if you just live in sort of a random neighborhood in Houston, odds are that you don't really have a really good park you can walk to. I mean, that's because historically, Houston has not invested in parks. It is not part of our legacy as a city. There's this quote from Mayor Louis Welch, who was mayor in the 60s and 70s. Houston doesn't need parks. He said they have big backyards. And the fact of the matter is, maybe there was a time when that was true. But now, a majority of Houstonians rent. Almost half of Harris County residents rent. And while some of them may be renting, apartments right next to big parks, or they might be renting homes in neighborhoods that have backyards, the reality is that the needs of our city have changed and our investments have not kept up.
Gotcha. What exactly is a neighborhood park when you say that?
So I'm thinking of that small park, maybe the size of a lot or two, that you can walk to in your neighborhood.
Okay.
And Houston has known for a while that we don't really have good access to parks. So we've gone through this kind of series of phases of investments in Houston over the past 2 decades. First was investing in our big crown jewel parks that I mentioned, a lot of philanthropic dollars pouring into that. Then the next step was trying to get more parks into neighborhoods. And we've done that through 2 projects. One of them is the Bayou Greenways, building these linear parks along the bayous. And the second is Spark Parks, which allow us to use HISD school playgrounds as parks.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's different types of parks. And you also brought up that there is a lot of private money that's investing into these parks. And Houston has relied on this a lot, right? For the big park projects, as you mentioned. And, shout out to the Kinder Foundation for the land bridge at Memorial Park and the Clay family and other donors who made the Eastern Glades happen. But why doesn't the city step up more?
I mean, that's a good question. And you can go back 100 years and point out that so many of our great parks are the result of philanthropic donations. The land itself for Hermann Park, for Memorial Park, those came from key donors. And if you just look at the amount of money Houston spends in taxpayer dollars today on parks, we are at the bottom of the list, 97 out of 100 biggest cities.
Wow.
We spend $32 per resident on parks. And you may say, well, that's just Texas, but no. Dallas spends $121. San Antonio spends $147. Austin spends $150.
What?
We do not invest in our parks. Now, if you were to add in those private investments and those philanthropic dollars, it pushes us up much, much higher. But just imagine what it would be if we were actually on par with public spending on our parks and then adding those philanthropic dollars. We would be to the moon when it comes to parks quality.
Okay, so that is kind of heartbreaking to hear, right? And look, Austin has this great reputation of being a city loaded with great parks. I've lived there when I was in college, and we used to go to the parks all the time. It was awesome, right? But what are the benefits of having these parks? Like, why are parks so great?
I mean, we know that parks contribute to public health, They improve public safety, they drive up property values, and all around improve your quality of life in ways that are hard to measure, but we know it when we see it. But the reality is that outside of some of our top parks, neighborhood parks are severely underfunded. And when I talked to the Hershey Foundation, which really focuses on this in Houston, they describe these parks as like the workhorse parks of Houston. They're the ones that kids want to go to every day. They're supposed to be near their homes, but the infrastructure is falling apart. They don't have programming. If we have neighborhood pools, they're closed most of the time. And we just aren't pouring dollars into these things. And it kind of makes sense because if we're funding our parks largely through like fundraising and philanthropic donations, it's hard to get some grandeur into like a small neighborhood park. And so these are these sort of things where really the taxpayer dollars should be doing the work. And a survey by the Kinder Institute found that 70% of Houstonians will be willing to pay an extra $2 a month on parks and green space, which would really put us at par. And at the same time, 8 in 10 Houston residents say that their neighborhood still needs more parks and green space. So we want it. We're willing to pay for it. We just have to make it happen.
But I don't think it's going to happen. The city's already facing a deficit. And as much as we want these things, it just seems like it's not going to happen, right? Like, did the city do more before this deficit? What was it like before?
Oh, no, it was worse. Like before now, you didn't even have like the philanthropic fundraising that you do right now to fill a lot of those gaps. But we do have a lot of opportunities for what Houston could do and that what other cities do to find other revenue streams for parks. You know, for example, the legislature can create a special parks district that creates special taxes just for parks. You can do a charter amendment similar to Rebuild Houston to raise and dedicate those dollars at a local level. You can just vote to lift the revenue cap and say, we're going to dedicate these dollars to parks. You can do a better job of integrating the city and county. You know, the county has its own park system. Houston has its own park system. They overlap. You could squeeze out inefficiencies and just integrate them together. These are all opportunities, but you really have to get some political momentum behind them. And then finally, the state collects a sporting goods tax that is supposed to go to state parks. But those state parks can also be funded through grants that can go to local parks. And so we could be saying, all right, the state's already collecting these sporting goods. The legislature should say, you need to send a certain percent of that to cities.
Yeah, that'd be nice because there are no state parks, you know, in Houston proper. Of course, you got Brazos Bend State Park. You've got Galveston Island State Park, which I love to go to, but there's nothing here within our city and even, you know, close to surrounding areas. So yeah, that'd be nice to get some of that money. And I want to get more solutions in just a second and kind of see what other cities are doing. But you brought up when we're not putting money into parks, pools are staying closed. The restrooms are locked. Play equipment is broken. Trash cans overflow. Like there's just so much that happens when there's not enough money invested in the parks. Is this happening all across Houston or is this happening more in low income areas?
I mean, Houston has this unique situation where we have a lot of park land in neighborhoods, mostly in underserved communities where you don't have the private philanthropic dollars you can pour in. I mean, go down to, say, Pumpkin Park, which is sort of a nice neighborhood park in the middle of River Oaks, and it is in pretty good condition because they can raise some funds for it. But if, say, you're at Bayland Park, which is a big park in Southwest Houston, they really relied on the county coming in and helping provide new revenue streams to bolster that park and bring it up to standard. But we have all of these parks across the city, but they don't have the funds they need to get them the equipment that could be usable, to get them the programming, to get them the maintenance. Like that is where our needs are. So on one hand, we're in good shape in that we don't need to acquire a whole lot of park space to get us up to standard, but we have to make better use of what we have now. And there's this lingering problem that if you have a whole bunch of park space that isn't really being used and isn't being invested in, the city could be tempted to say, we're in a budget problem, let's just sell this land.
Wow. That would be even worse, right? Like now you're taking this away. And, you know, so far, my big takeaway is that, yes, all this private money, all these donations, these foundations kicking in and making our parks great is excellent. That's nice. Like that's a good thing. But it sounds like it's also a curse.
A little bit, because it takes off the pressure. It's like an analgesic. If we were looking at Hermann Park and it were in the condition today that it was 20, 30 years ago, where like the reflecting pool had dead animals in it and it was kind of falling apart, and the facilities were being used for people without homes just to hang out in all day, like the city would get some pressure to say, okay, we need to do something about this. But because we've been able to bring in the private sector and the philanthropic sector to help out with it, the city can say, well, job done. We don't have to step up here. But if you take a step back and look at the entire city, there are a whole lot of parks that are not where we want them to be. But because they're sort of small neighborhood parks, they don't catch your eye. There's not this critical mass of support. And at the same time, you still have a lot of Houstonians who have their big backyards, and they'd say, well, why do I need to go down to that park if I can just chill in my backyard?
Hey Houston, it's Earth Day. Today's the perfect day to think about our planet and take action. Imagine walking through your neighborhood shaded by beautiful, towering trees. That means cooler temps, cleaner air, a greener Houston. That's what Trees for Houston is all about. For over 40 years, Trees for Houston has planted and maintained over 880,000 trees across the city, making Houston a greener, healthier place. And on Earth Day, there's no better way to give back than by helping plant the future. Want to make a real impact? A donation to Trees for Houston means more trees, more shade, and a healthier city for future generations. Every dollar helps. Even $10 can make a difference. In fact, I donated on behalf of my family, and let me tell you, it feels great. Celebrate Earth Day with a gift that keeps growing. Visit treesforhouston.org to donate today. That's treesforhouston.org. Let's make every day Earth Day. We're all looking for a perfect Mother's Day present, so let me tell you about the Aura frame. It was just named the best digital frame by Wirecutter, and I got one for my mom, and she's not that tech savvy, but it was a breeze for her to set up. The best part, once she was connected to the Aura app, all of my siblings and so many cousins all over the country, we started sharing photos with mom right away. Pictures of grandkids, memories from our childhood, and even one from my cousin's wedding where my mom and dad fell asleep during the ceremony. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping that off of Instagram. The picture and video quality is second to none, and Aura frames look good all around the house. Aura has a great deal right now for Mother's Day. For a limited time, listeners can save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off plus free shipping on their best-selling Carver matte frame. That's AURA frames.com. Promo code CityCast. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. So many different problems here. And to add on top of this, right, let's say in a perfect world, in 2 years, all these neighborhood parks are now fixed up. We're putting money into it. Everything is great. Now, the second part of this problem, and this is something that you've been researching here, is once these parks are built and ready to go or upkept and everything looks great, neighbors can't even get to them. What's happening with that?
Well, the big problem in Houston is that the city does not have responsibility for most sidewalks. That is the responsibility for the private landowner to make sure you have good sidewalks. So you can end up with this patchwork or poor conditions where if you want to walk from your house to a neighborhood park and it's just quarter mile away, half mile away, that could be the most miserable walk in the world because we don't take responsibility for it. And at the same time, we're pouring all of these great philanthropic dollars into the parks themselves, but they can't really play a role in improving just the conditions around the park. That falls on the city to make sure that our streets are safe, that our sidewalks are wide. And, I like to describe the matching public-private dollars that we poured into the Bayou Greenways as like building a freeway, but we don't have any on-ramps for it. It's hard to get from your neighborhoods to those investments we've made. We're not getting a good return, the maximum return on the investments we've made in parks, whether it's Memorial Park, whether it's Hermann Park, whether it's the Bayou Greenways, if you can't get there. And if the only way to get there is by hopping in your car and driving, it means one, you have to set aside green space for parking spots, which is not ideal. That's not how you want to spend your park space. And two, well, if you're hopping in your car, you might as well just drive somewhere else.
So what's the solution here? I know you kind of hit on this, but this is a problem that goes beyond parks. And maybe this is an entire different episode on CityCast Houston. Like, how do we fix these sidewalks? But is there a solution that you can talk about to get this going?
I mean, I really think it falls on City Hall to say we're going to prioritize the cityscape around our parks so that they're easy to get to for people who live near them. I've talked to city officials who say, listen, trying to fix every single sidewalk in the city of Houston is just so financially over the top. We cannot fund that. And my pushback say, what if we just funded the places where it would provide real value, around our parks, in our dense walkable neighborhoods, near apartment complexes so that people can get around their neighborhoods. And I think that's a place that Houston could prioritize. I've heard city council members talk about the idea of getting a sidewalk bond to pay for those sidewalks. And I think that's the sort of thing that Houstonians would pay for and say, we've already got these great parks. How can I get the best use out of them?
Yeah, I would think so as well. Like, that is something that's totally worth it and such a benefit for a community. And, I just want to put my thoughts on parks out there and like why they're so important, right? I think about my neighborhood park and I live in the suburbs. So I get it. It's different. We have an HOA that, maintains all of this. There are some county dollars that come into it and city dollars as well. But for the most part, it is our neighborhood park that is maintained by the HOA. And this is where we take our kids on those nights where we have an open night. And this is where we do the crawfish boil. This is where we meet up with friends and we can easily get there with our bikes or walk or run. And it just becomes this great place to meet everybody, hang out. You got shade. It's so perfect. And the fact that not everyone can get this, it's so heartbreaking because it's such an important thing.
It really is. And sometimes I worry that we have this real negativity attitude where we look at the downsides and risks of new parks rather than the upsides. I remember when they were doing construction on the 529 spur going into downtown. And there's push to say, listen, you've shut off about half of it. We don't really need it. Just tear it down and turn that space into a park for Midtown. It's a dense neighborhood. It makes a lot of sense to have more parks there. And a lot of the pushback was people saying like, oh, well, like it's just going to be filled with homeless people and nobody's going to use it. And why do we need parks? And it shows that the city really does have a responsibility to make sure that you're addressing the quality of life issues that stand in the way between people being at their homes and apartments and getting to the parks and using them well.
What sort of promises have you made to yourself this year? Getting in better shape, eating healthier, saving more money, traveling somewhere new? What about discovering a new culture by learning a new language? With Babbel, you can do that in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons, handcrafted by over 200 language experts, get you to begin speaking your new language in 3 weeks or whatever pace you choose. And because conversing is the key to really understanding each other in new languages, Babbel is designed using practical, real-world conversations. The Spanish I learned on Babbel really helped me on a recent trip to Mexico City, ordering in restaurants, shopping at the textile market, cheering on at the Lucha Libre, and I've been keeping it up since I got home. You're a podcast listener. I know that because you're listening here. I bet you'll love Babbel's new podcasts. On Eavesdrop in Espanol, which I listen to, you get to listen to a real conversation, then have the teacher host explain back to you. Then you listen again and catch everything. And you can even read along in the transcript. It's a really fun and effective way to learn. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting CityCast listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Hey, CityCast. According to me and my calculator, you will spend more time this week between the sheets than you will at work. So upgrade your sheets to Cozy Earth. Luxury starts where you rest. I start my evening in buttery soft Cozy Earth bamboo pajamas. Then I dip into a Cozy Earth bamboo sheet set. They are silky and temperature regulating. Forget the 9 to 5. Prioritize your 5 to 9. Cozy Earth products will transform those hours into a sanctuary. And they take comfort seriously with a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty. Luxury should not be out of reach, so Cozy Earth is giving CityCast listeners 40% off their best-selling sheets, towels, pajamas, and more. Visit CozyEarth.com and use the code CozyHouston for 40% off, because you deserve a great night's sleep, and sanctuary awaits at Cozy Earth.
So many different things at play here. And now I want to talk about what other cities are doing. Like, what are some unique solutions that maybe we could apply here in Houston and improve our parks?
Well, Oklahoma City has this interesting thing where every 5 years they renew like a 1-cent tax that they spend on parks and other similar quality of life issues. And the idea is that we're going to use this to fund a 5-year project. And after that, we're going to propose a new park project. And if you like it, you can renew the tax. And if you don't, you can vote it down. And this earns the trust of the community to see, like, you spent this money well, you did it in your 5 years. We trust you to do another 5-year project and another 5-year project, re-upping like that.
Evan, I'm not hating on my, brothers to the north here, but the fact that Oklahoma City has a more progressive park policy and tax is kind of wild to me, because I've been to Oklahoma City and surrounding cities a lot. And I never think about, like, they are the leaders when it comes to parks, but I'm wrong here. That sounds amazing.
Well, lots of cities have their own ideas, but basically it's trying to find those dedicated revenue streams for parks. Kind of like how we have the Harris County Flood Control District that provides funding for flood infrastructure. We have the Hospital District. We have the Port District. There's the newly created Gulf Coast Protection District to raise funds for the Ike Dike. But if you look at, say, Minneapolis, its park system is operated almost as a separate unit of government, a lot like these things, with its own taxing authority. Seattle has a parks district that collects taxes. That's something Houston can do. In Los Angeles, voters approved an annual parcel tax that's just an improved property tax that collects just for parks. There are a lot of things that cities can do, but the challenge is, how do you get folks to pay for it? And the surveys show that Houstonians are willing to pay for parks. Yeah. But I think that you have to show them that these funds are going to be dedicated and spent well.
Evan, I know the survey shows it. You just said it. But then we brought up the Midtown potential park, and everyone's like, do we even need a park there? Do you think Houstonians at the end of the day are willing to pay more for parks?
I think the survey shows that Houstonians are willing to pay more. And when we've been asked in the past to pay more, say for Buffalo Bayou Park, we stepped up. But in that situation, the arrangement was that every public dollar would be matched by a private dollar. And so we presume that because people are paying out of pocket, there's extra due diligence to make sure that the funds are going to spend well. And if you look at setups like Buffalo Bayou Park, which really benefited from multi-million-dollar donation from the Kinders, it was arranged so that the nearby tax increment reinvestment zone would cover the park and provide maintenance dollars over the life of the park. So that these investments would last beyond the initial upfront cash.
All right, Evan, design your perfect park.
Well, there's the park kind of that I want, and there's the park that I think Houston needs. Like, something that I want is something that would, say, go through Midtown, a vertical park that would connect Discovery Green down to Hermann Park, or something that would be lateral across downtown to connect Buffalo Bayou Park over to Discovery Green, and really let us get the best out of this. But looking at the maps, I think what we need are just more neighborhood parks in Southwest Houston. Really dense community, lots of apartment complexes. The best park you've got over there is Bayland Park. I think you need just more smaller parks that are easy for folks to get to.
That would be amazing. That's something that I hope the city does here in the upcoming years. And maybe this sparks some of that, oomph to get this going. This was very interesting. Evan, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
That was Evan Mintz. He's a regular contributor here on CityCast Houston, so be sure to subscribe and also follow him on social media, where he'll share more of his deep dive into our neighborhood parks with the link in our show notes. As I mentioned, it's Earth Day, and I want to shout out Trees for Houston. For over 40 years, Trees for Houston has planted and maintained over 880,000 trees across the city, transforming schools, parks, and communities one tree at a time. And guess what? You can be part of this movement too this Earth Day by donating at treesforhouston.org. Every dollar helps Trees for Houston plant more trees, create more shade, and grow a healthier Houston for future generations. That's treesforhouston.org. If you learned something new today, please share this episode with 3 of your friends who love parks and ask them to subscribe. Also, please rate and review the show wherever you listen. Want more Houston news? Our daily newsletter, Hey Houston, has you covered with all of the latest happenings around H-Town. Subscribe with the info in our show notes. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. It was a wild time in the 80s here.
It was.